Hello, and you're very welcome to the MAPA Music Podcast. My name is Mark Egan, and I'm one of the course coordinators for music performance at the Northwest Regional College. In this podcast, our students will present features and host interviews on a wide range of musical topics. We hope you enjoy the show. In our first interview, talented Derry singer Katie Lynch interviews local artist Jordan O'Keefe, a former finalist in Britain's Got Talent.
Well, thanks Jordan for coming.
No problem at all.
I'll just get stuck in. So what made you want to pursue music full time?
So it started whenever I was younger, and I used to do all these things in the house. I used to actually watch Peter Kay, right? And I actually learnt his accent. I used to come in and do the full set in front of my mum and dad and their friends. Like that's how much I wanted attention when I was younger. And I did a Michael Jackson one time. I went up the stairs and found my dad's fedora, my mum's red leather jacket and a glove, and came down the stairs and did Billie Jean. So all them wee things, my mum was like, "Oh, he wants to be something to do with music." So then I'll get my guitar one time, and then that's how it started. And I fell in love with it. And I got back in it around 13, 14. And then just kept things going. And here we are.
Love it. And how do you think your past experiences have helped shape your career?
Well, one thing I know now is it's not about getting there so quick. Everyone wants success right away, where it's all about the journey. And I've had a mad journey from 18 being on TV to now, you know, being a father and stuff. And things happen in your life that you have to rebalance. But the main thing is you stick to it, not give up. So my career shaped in many ways. I've went from wanting to be a global star to changing and going, I don't really like that. It's not really for me being in the limelight all the time and people doing their head in what is. Yep. To then going on to writing songs, maybe pursuing that in a different way and doing things for other people. But, you know, gaining things like everyone wants to make money, so financially being secure is the main thing, but also getting to stay at home and spend time with my kids. And then maybe do the odd cover here and sing in the bars and just enjoy it. It's all about enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point in doing it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm enjoying it.
That's good. And how do you get yourself into like the creative mindset to start writing your own music?
Oh, plenty of vodka. No, it just depends. You know, there's no way of actually getting into the creative mindset for me. It's just whenever you feel it. Like there's times I'll be in the house and something will pop into my head when I'm watching a TV show and go, you know what, I need to go and do this. And that's when the best songs come out. Like the best songs I've ever written have all came out in about 20 minutes, half an hour. If you sit sometimes you can sit in songs for days and they do become good, but the ones that just come like that are the ones that do well. Like.
And for you personally, how do you think that the music scene in Derry has changed in the last 5 or 6 years? So?
Well, there's a lot of talent. Like there's so many good singers, musicians. From what I've watched, I remember seeing Soak years ago whenever I was about 17, 18, and that's when she came on the scene and she was absolutely brilliant. And from then, I think it's gave more people confidence because she was so organic. She was never really pushed. It wasn't like a machine thing. It wasn't like, oh, we'll pick her and we'll do this with her. She was writing her own songs in her bedroom and then bang, things really went massive for her. So I think people now have more confidence to be themselves, go out and do whatever they want to do. Yeah. The talent here is brilliant, like, so it's good. It's great to see.
And who are your biggest inspirations?
Changes all the time. Whenever I was younger, it was Stevie Wonder. Then I went through a stage of loving James Morrison. And the Ed Sheeran. I loved Ed Sheeran for years, which I got to meet him too and sing with him. And then it's changed again. You know, it's John Mayer now and other things. But it's good to take inspiration from so many different people and then bring them into the one, and that makes you you. You're not really one certain person. You're yourself, but you're taking from each person. And going, I like that. That's making them the one. You know, and that's what makes you you.
I love that. And finally, what advice would you give to all us local musicians who are just starting out?
Don't be so hard on yourself, but be hard on yourself, but don't be to the point where it brings you down too much. Always expect the best and strive for the best, but don't get down if things, the first hurdle, you know what I mean, even the second, third, fourth, you have to get knocked down so many times to get back. And somebody says to you, oh, you've never made it, or you're going nowhere. It doesn't matter about being there right away. It's the journey of getting there, is what I said before. I'm only 27, and I know I'll do something great, but it's not right now. But I'm still working on it. Every day you have to be working, and you have to be creative. And sometimes you might go away from it. You might go, you know what, I can't be bothered with this anymore. But you have to do that to come back and love it again. You're going to fall in love with it. It's like a relationship. Sometimes you fall in love, and then you're going to be in love again. But just never give up and keep at it.
Thanks so much.
No problem. Happy days.
And that song was from Emma Hughes, a former student here at the Northwest Regional College.
So today I'm here with Jason, and he's going to be telling me all about classical music and kind of everything about the genre. So, hey Jason, who would you say your favourite composer is?
I've actually given this a good bit of thought and a good bit of consideration. And after doing that, I think my two favourite composers would actually be Handel and Bizet. And it's mainly because of the operas that they've composed. Handel has created operas, and instead of using the soprano, alto, tenor and bass, he used castratos, countertenors and contraltos. And if you don't know what they are, a countertenor is a male who can sing as high as a female naturally. A castrato is a child who's able to sing like a female due to being castrated. And a contralto is a woman who's able to sing as low as a tenor or a baritone naturally as well. And I really enjoy listening to these voice types because I think we can really learn from them and challenge ourselves with them. And when it comes to Bizet, the opera Carmen comes to mind, and I think it's a brilliant opera. I think because it's set in Spain, it's sung in French, but it also has bits of Spanish in it at times. And the arias, Habanera and Toreador, they're the most, like, you think of them when you think of Carmen. And they've been used in TV shows and TV ads, and that's years after the opera has been created.
That's really interesting. So what could you tell us about classical music that's being made in the 19th century?
In the 19th century, it was probably the biggest century for classical music because Beethoven was composing in the early 19th century before he died in 1827. Beethoven was the biggest composer in the 19th century, and he premiered his first symphony. Within the next 10 years, Beethoven established the template for his Romantic Symphony, which was his third. During this time, he also wrote the most famous four-note phrase in music. In 1816, Rossini's comic opera, The Barber of Seville, premiered, and it was doing really well in London and New York. And it's actually noted that people were on the street humming Largo al Factotum. We're actually humming Largo al Factotum, and it's actually on Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993, and that's over 150 years after the opera was released. In 1850s, Verdi's new opera Rigoletto was censored because of its portrayal of immoral behaviour amongst royalty. The opera was actually banned in France following its premiere and wasn't allowed to be staged again until 1882.
Sounds good. So, how do you think classical music has kind of influenced modern music today?
I think classical music has influenced modern music, although classical music is over 250 years old and the music sound is completely different. We still take influence from classical music. For example, Schubert, who was born in 1797, used the verse chorus format in all his songs. He composed over 600 songs and he still did that for each one of them. And they both had the same aspiration. They wanted to have people listen to their song and get into the song first time round, and they wanted the chorus to stick with him. If he was still here today, he wouldn't feel strange to him about the music today regarding chords, the shape, the verse, chorus structure, or the piano accompaniment, because it's all the same sort of stuff that was in his day 250 years ago.
So, what could you tell us about castrato?
I've actually researched what a castrato was before when I was learning about my own voice type. And I'm a countertenor, and when I was told, I was really intrigued about different voice types because I've only knew about soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And a castrato is actually a prepubescent teen or child who was castrated, and it means then that the child can sing like a female singer throughout their whole life, even as a fully grown man. And it could also mean that men could perform breeches role in operas, so it means that they could perform as a woman in the operas. And the last known castrato was actually Alessandro Moreschi. Moreschi was actually castrated at the age of 7, and he had a brilliant career. He sang in the Sistine Chapel choir. In the choir, there was another 6 castratos. However, he was the only one that was able to sustain the tessitura of the work. And unfortunately, in 1922, he died. But before he died, he made recordings of him singing, and it means he's the only castrato ever to make recordings.
So, what would you say your thoughts are on the recent controversy between Hendrix and Nigel Kennedy?
My thoughts on the Hendrix and Nigel Kennedy controversy are actually mixed. I can see both sides of the argument, and I do understand where both sides are coming from. On one side, I see where Classical FM wanted to stop the Hendrix tribute because the song wasn't written by a classical composer, and the song wasn't originally in that genre. Classical FM may see it as they find it difficult to get younger people to listen to classical music already, and they may want younger people to listen to the original composers and original works of the time. And on the Nigel Kennedy side, I can understand where he wanted to pay tribute to a brilliant artist. He said this is musical segregation, which I do believe, because musicals shouldn't have rules or boundaries. It's a way for people to break down barriers and express themselves and express their emotions and their feelings. And it's actually what Nigel said. He said, my whole career has been about breaking down barriers, and I do think that's really true. And I think if the cover was to go on and the tribute, people might get into classical music can also sort of work with all our genres, and all our genres can go into classical. So then it means then that they might go look at all our operas and all our classical music.
In this interview, singer-songwriter Joe Allen talks about one of his favourite groups, the Beatles.
I think nowadays there's a far cry in difference when it comes to showing your support for your favourite band or artist than there was, as your dad would say back in the old days. It's more simple, I'd say. You log on the Instagram or Twitter and, your feed's overrun by fan cams of musicians, compilations, timed perfectly with songs that will have lyrics which will almost certainly depict Harry Styles as a gear boss, which makes no sense when you're playing WAP. It's either that or the same mean way Ed Sheeran, standing awkwardly on the red carpet at the Brit Awards in a hoodie and jeans. You get one or the other. However, I think the first real standout case of fandoms or any sort of thing like it came back in the 60s with, you guess it, Beatlemania, taking the globe by storm and, landing back in the USSR by the 70s, no pun intended, that's a lie. I think honestly it built the basis for the whole stereotypes, girls loving rock stars who sing ballads, and of course, they look cute for their time period. I mean, if you look at Paul McCartney now, it's a bit different, but the common belief for where it formed was in the aftermath of, their releases such as She Loves You and Please Please Me, which I think is 1963. Originally coined I mean, it was originally coined in the United States, where Beatlemania was derived as a sense of adoration and awe, which comes with adolescence and, you know, idols. It often followed the screaming fans that would show up at the gig with media believing it actually played in the female sexual fantasy, which in some ways, if you look back in retrospect, it's definitely quite... a man definitely wrote that article, vibes and all. Some sources would even state, though, that, you know, people would approach the group and believing they had supernatural healing powers, as the grasp they had on the young female populace was that strong. I think, though, if you want to talk about their most astounding, debatably miraculous feat they achieved, would be, you know, the first time a band ever sold out a stadium. I mean, they sold out the Shea Stadium in New York, where I think it was said the band couldn't actually hear themselves because of how loud the crowd was, and also probably the mixing room stemming from the practice rooms. Yes, we know who you are, and we know that you need more game. Stop crying about it. I mean, one other achievement, though, I think it would stick out, would be their infamous appearance in the Ed Sullivan Show in February 1964. 70 million people tuned in to see him perform I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I saw her standing there. But little does it know, despite these figures, it is estimated that the queue for a taxi on Derry on a Saturday night is longer, and you should probably give up all hope of a sensible way home just to avoid disappointment. Despite the Beatles' discovery of LSD in the 1960s, their fan base did in fact stick through the lyricism of I Am the Walrus and Revolution 9, and their legacy does remain to this day. I think, though, if you do want to look back, it's absolutely amazing to look back on it. If you start making music 60 years ago now almost, and, you know, George Harrison and John Lennon aren't with us anymore, the ability to have such a complete legacy like theirs throughout this time is amazing. I mean, I think if I were to look back now on history and even to the modern day, the closest example I could see to it would be One Direction, and simply just because the Irish don't like seeing the English succeed, I'd say Westlife's better.
John Curran is an audio engineer and hip-hop producer. In this interview with his collaborator, Derry rapper Josh Haggerty, John talks about the art of recording vocals.
Well, John, how are you? What's your favourite microphone for recording vocals, and why would you say that it is?
For me, I would say that the Rode NTK condenser microphone has to be my favourite. The Rode NTK has a curved out pattern which picks up signal from whatever source is in front of it. The NTK provides a warm, delicate sound and wide dynamic range. A condenser mic also helps to capture higher frequencies if needed in a performance.
That's great. What approach would you use for recording vocals for singers of different genres? For example, rock or hip-hop or pop?
When I'm recording vocals for different genres, I would think about how the vocals should sound for the track, depending on that genre. For vocals on a rock song, I would use a dynamic mic, as this has a higher sound pressure level and can handle the performance. When it comes to working with a singer-songwriter and the performance is more delicate, I would choose a condenser microphone to capture the best representation of the vocal and performance.
Awesome. What effects do you use on your mixes most commonly?
When mixing vocals on a track, I first think about what the song is and what may suit the track and figure out what effects would work for a specific project. I like to have multiple effects on the vocals to bring some character to them, one of which is reverb that I would apply on another take of the vocal to work with the original and mix them together to create some space in the mix. Another effect would be a compressor, which will help bring the vocals louder sections down and the quiet parts up in volume.
Awesome. What is your favourite vocal recording?
My favourite vocal recording is by Michael Hutchence from In Excess. I like this recording because you can hear the real emotion in his voice. I also like the choices made for the vocals with the effects such as reverb, adding the character to the song. Overall, I think that the vocal recording in this track makes a big impact on the track and touches many people who listen to it.
All right, and final question, who in your opinion would you say is the best singer?
In my opinion, I think that the best singer would be Amy Winehouse. I think that she had a nice tone in her voice and had a lot of dynamic range in her voice. I think that her voice on her track always sounds very good. Her voice was easily recognizable when she sings live. She has a strong presence on stage and could touch the crowd with her performance.
Piranha Man Patrick Bradley is obsessed with the piano in traditional Irish music. Here he is talking about some of his favourite artists and recordings. So Patrick, can you tell us about the role that the piano played in traditional Irish music?
The piano made an appearance in Irish traditional music in the early 20th century. Accompaniment was common on the old 78 RPM recordings. Most of the piano plays a fringe role commonly used as an accompaniment. Vamping was the accompaniment style of the piano used, where the pianist usually plays simple chordal accompaniment. On many of the old 78 RPM recordings, the quality of the accompaniment was very poor because the studio piano players were not familiar with Irish music. This was avoided by performers using their own piano players instead, and these players had a vamping style that is still used today. In its basic form, vamping simply involves playing triads, 3 chord notes in the right hand and a single bass note in the left hand. The left hand typically plays on the beat while the right hand plays chords on the offbeat.
So you've mentioned one of the players you like is Micheál O'Sullivan. Can you tell us a little bit about him, Patrick?
Micheál O'Sullivan was an excellent example of a piano player in traditional Irish music, and he is also a composer. He would combine traditional Irish music with elements from classical and jazz styles. His album The Dolphin's Way had 3 tunes on it, called Woodbrook, The Old Grey Goose and Ihanolog. He held the professorship of music at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, which he founded at the University of Limerick in 1994.
1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I was sitting drinking, led to thinking, which led to reminiscing, which kinda left me missing you. And so I started down in spirits, trying to erase my own. The memories, they haunt like ghosts. See, I could sit in this bar all night and try and drown the pain. Wake up hungover with a broken heart and try to do the same damn thing again. Or I could come to the conclusion that I was under an illusion that drinking's gonna mend my soul. But I know it won't. It's probably better I don't. Well, I saw this pretty little blonde thing taking off her wedding ring. I started wondering what was going on. And she started talking about her problems and how she'd hit rock bottom. She said she needed help moving on. So as she confided in me, I took comfort in the whiskey until she wanted to go home. See, I could sit in this bar all night and try and drown the pain. Wake up hungover in a stranger's bed and try to do the same damn thing again. Or I can come to the conclusion that I was under an illusion that drinking's gonna mend my soul. But I know it won't. It's probably better I don't. On the way home, I took a stroll down memory lane, remembering the good times, trying to forget the pain. There's a voice in my head saying should've never let her go, but there's a voice in my heart saying please don't put her through this anymore. See, I can pick the phone up and maybe give you a call, tell you that I'm sorry and I realize that I was wrong after all. Or I could come to the conclusion that I was under an illusion that we were gonna be alright. No, no, we won't. It's probably better I.
And that song was by Matthew McCracken from the college's 2016 album. And the song was called Better I Don't.
Hi, I'm here with Sarah Jane, and I'm going to be talking to her about how music can be used as a form of protest, especially in the civil rights movement in America. So, Sarah, what kind of impact do you think jazz has had on civil rights movements?
Well, I mean, I think the impact of jazz on most of music history is very immense, but I personally believe the biggest impact that jazz had on the civil rights movement was because of the popularity of jazz at the time. Mm-hmm. The kind of audience that jazz had, so like mainstream society, so at that time a majority white audience, it kind of allowed black voices and black messages to get through to people who wouldn't have heard something like that before. So if you think the likes of like Sam Cooke, A Change Is Gonna Come, was one of the most popular songs in 1964 when it was released, and that was a song about his struggle as a black man. So I think it was very interesting to see how like this form of music was able to reach different audiences. And as this like kind of reached different audiences, the jazz artists kind of acted as like a bridge between the two different communities and acted as like a unifier between the two. And I think it was very interesting to see how between like joining these two communities, it was able to transcend so many different kind of social barriers at that time. So it's really, really interesting stuff. But yeah.
That was really interesting. Like, see as well, who do you think some of the most influential artists were within the movement?
Well, one of my favourite artists would have to be Nina Simone.
Oh, yeah.
I think she is genuinely one of the most amazing people I've ever met, or ever not I haven't met her, but that I've ever seen. I think she's one of the most influential musicians as well because of the passion and feeling she puts into every single performance and every single song she does.
Definitely.
Like there's this song called Mississippi Goddamn. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's basically one of her first, she said herself, her first civil rights song. And in this song, it's this raw anger that you can hear in her voice and in the lyrics. And it's very justified, obviously, because she's singing about like what's happening to black people in America. And it's this unfiltered thing that nobody had ever heard before. I think it's so interesting to hear, especially from like this perspective of me. Like I'm a white female who lives in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to experience anything like that, so it's very interesting to hear her perspective. And I think especially where she shines is her live performances. Like if you ever end up watching a video of her performances, her physical expressions and her facial expressions it's insane to watch. It's almost like being trapped in like a trance. It's insane. But I would also say like another one, I'm talking for ages here,
right,
but another artist that I think is really important to the civil rights movement, especially for like the rights of black performers, is Sam Cooke. And I know I mentioned him earlier, but I'm going to mention him again. I think he was really a trailblazer in many aspects of equal rights for black performers. And even in his earlier career, I think he was in a vocal group with I think 6 or 7 other singers, and he was one of the first performers to ever refuse to play for a segregated audience. So it was this start of civil disobedience that led to the civil rights movement, and he was kind of one of the first people to do that. And as well, he was also the first like major black artist to be signed to RCA Records, and he was unhappy with his record deal, and so he decided, and I think this is one of the most, not petty, but it's one of the most kind of amazing things to see. He was unhappy with his deal, so he decided, I'm going to set up my own publishing company and my own studio and like raise black voices up. And this was the first time this had ever been done, and it was just, he was so influential and so like just amazing in what he was doing, and had such a strong message and such a strong voice. And I think it's very sad to know that, because he was murdered, I think it was 1964, he was murdered I think it was in Los Angeles, and for the short time he was here, he did so much for a movement that he pretty much dedicated his life to, and it's very, very interesting to like witness now.
Because that was probably while hard for him to build up his own wee thing.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think he actually received death threats.
God.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that there, and like, because you're black as well, you feel while, like, you don't know what way to take the threats.
Yeah, I think he took them seriously. I mean, he was murdered, so.
See as well, do you personally think that music has a place within conflict?
See, it's a hard question because I personally believe, and this is my honest opinion here, the best music I've heard, hands down, is always music that kind of has a fear to it or like an anger. Maybe that's just me expressing my own emotions, who knows? But I feel as though the best music always does come out of like struggle or conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And if you even think back to, like, even now, music that people think is kind of revered and kind of you look up to it in a sense is 50s, 60s, 70s, and historically not a very good time for society.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just very interesting to see. I mean, I've kind of gone off topic there, but I think with like music and conflict, you can't really have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you even think to most of the popular songs within the civil rights movement, they're all directly related to conflict in some form, obviously. Like, for example, Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I'll talk about the topic of the song anyway. So that song is basically about Billie Holiday comparing the lynching of black Americans to picking fruit off trees.
Mm.
And it's actually, when you listen to the lyrics of the song, it paints a very gruesome picture. But like, realistically, that was a reality for millions of people in America. And I think it's like even 50 years on now, or 50 plus years on, that fear of retaliation from like bigoted people and racists still lives on, although it's in a slightly different form. So really, it's the fact that for so many people, music is a medium through which they express themselves, and some of our most powerful emotions are fear and anger. So of course the music that people write expressing these emotions is going to come across as the most impactful or powerful, and that's why I think they're so intertwined, like music and conflict, that you can't really separate the two.
Josh Hegarty is a rapper from Dungiven, County Derry. He has released 2 tapes on YouTube and is currently working on his debut album. In this interview with John Curran, he talks about rivalries in hip-hop and how they can occasionally turn violent.
Right, Josh, can you give us some examples of hip-hop rivalries, feuds?
Well, there's a lot to go over. It's funny because hip-hop as a genre is quite young in comparison, but it's still got quite a storied history, especially when it comes to conflict and rivalries. There's loads of like incredibly legendary beefs, like Biggie and Tupac, Jay-Z and Nas, Eazy-E and Ice Cube, and then even some that are more recent, like 50 Cent and Rick Ross. As well as the American market, there's a few ones that are like really notable within the UK. You have Bugsy Malone and Chip, Skepta and Devilman, Wiley and Devlin, and then one of the most recent ones in the UK was Wiley and Stormzy's one. And these sort of blew up in a sense, especially Wiley and Stormzy. Stormzy's one of the biggest UK artists at the minute.
So Josh, how did these feuds affect the hip-hop market?
I would say they were affected in 2 mainly notable ways. As always, with conflict, there's a lot of attention is set on both the artists, both in terms of the mainstream media and then in terms of like socially and in terms of listening and fan bases. So as a result, even crews that artists might be a part of, they gain attention too. This ultimately leads to the pair of them having more success in terms of record sales, social media followings, and just generally being more well known. But sometimes, in the case of Biggie and Tupac's beef, sometimes it escalates into violence and even at times death. And at times like these, it's known that the genre can sometimes be looked down upon and be seen as quite dangerous. And that in turn can lead to artists being blackballed within the industry, as the higher up and execs don't want that sort of image being shown upon their networks and their labels. They would like to sometimes keep it quite clean.
Do rap artists need a conflict to establish credibility?
I don't think they necessarily need conflict or rivalries to establish themselves. Like Kanye West, his first album went off the rails, was so good, and he established himself, and he didn't really go with anybody for it. He sort of got by on just purely being a great artist and having good connections. But there's a lot of times where artists will use rivalry as a way of bursting onto the scene. A notable example of that would be 50 Cent's How to Rob. It was one of his first singles that really blew up, and he took shots at basically everybody that was huge within hip hop at the time, like Jay-Z, everybody like that. But also, there's different types of rivalries, more competitive rivalries, more than personal, and that's often used to increase record sales. An example of that is back in 2007, 50 Cent was releasing his fourth album called The Curtis Album. Kanye West was also coming out with his own fourth album called 808s and Heartbreak. And the two of these had a quite a friendly rivalry in comparison to other rivalries, where 50 Cent said he would retire if he was outsold, and Kanye West was saying he was going to retire him. And as a result, both of them did massive numbers. And more recently, Drake's Certified Lover Boy and Kanye West Donda could even be put into that category. And both of them have done insane numbers as a result. Both of them are two of the largest hip hop artists in the world at the minute. And I think as a whole, it just shines the genre a light. And it does sometimes help them establish credibility.
Josh, which rap artists influence your style of music?
For me personally, I would say that Nas and J. Cole and people like that, purely for their ability to weave stories and for their ability to draw emotion into the music. More recently, I've come to become a fan of obviously Kanye West, but also Mike Dean, and that's more for the production and the actual sound. I think the way that they've sort of revolutionized hip hop as a genre, it's no longer just a drum and a beat. It's become so much more with sampling and such, and I think that that's a great place to draw inspiration from. I sort of got into hip hop as a result of 50 Cent and his first album, so I think he's one of my favorite artists for as long as I live. And the way that he had a smooth aggression in how he delivered his flow, I really like that, and I've tried to incorporate it at times in my own music.
What is the current state of hip hop in Northern Ireland?
Within Northern Ireland and even Ireland in general, the hip hop scene is relatively small in comparison to other genres of music and would sometimes be seen as underground, but I still believe that it's got quite a consistent fan base across the general island. Even with it being quite small in comparison, there's still some massive breakout artists such as Kneecap, a boy from Belfast called John Zoo, and obviously Versatile, who were performing gigs and all in 2018 and are still going strong. So I think there's quite a lot of potential within the scene to really blow up, but it'll just take some time and effort.
I feel like I'm drowning in bubbles. Started drinking my vodka in double. No matter how much I swallow,